Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the FitBigStrong podcast. My name is Ashton, and I created this podcast to basically give out as much free, high-quality information as I could. I want to make it easier for people to get fitter, bigger, stronger. Kind of works out with that name. You've probably noticed that I'm a bit delayed in regards to this episode. Well, I have some news. I flew up to a place called Townsville in Australia for a state competition. I had some clients up there and I helped handle. And so that took up quite a lot of my time. And so I wasn't able to actually produce the podcast. So there you go. That's for my hiatus. But I have a good one today. It is advanced nutrition strategies for maximizing results. What does that even mean? Well, this episode is really about the 5 to 10% differences for those who want to put the extra 100 to 200% effort in. You know, and so how can we actually creep out as much as we possibly can from nutrition? You know, some of this is theoretical based, and some has, biological literature behind it, which supports these claims. But this is that, basically. And so 3 things we're going to focus on. We're going to actually summarize the hierarchy of importance. So what is actually the most important thing in the first place? We're then going to kind of take a basic approach to nutrition, something like a cookie cutter macro coach would give you, where they just send you numbers every month. We're going to identify that strategy, and then we're going to upgrade the strategy using these principles that I'm going to teach you today. Very cool. Let's get straight into it, hey? So, the hierarchy of importance. Well, just a quick disclaimer. This is just kind of a general overview, and it pertains to any fitness goal. Bodybuilding, powerlifting, weightlifting, cardiovascular fitness, doesn't matter. This is just a general overview of what you should probably focus on first. I'm not talking about health at all, just purely results. And it's kind of my speculation on what I think is most important. It isn't this big exhaustive list with all the variables. It's just what I think from a dietary perspective, But it should be enough to provide you with a framework just for the strategies that I want to educate you on. Let's get straight into it. This is the hierarchy of importance. What's the first thing that I should be focusing on if I want to focus on performance? You need to be eating sufficient calories. If your intake needs to match your goals. Too little calories and stuff just won't happen. Right? We want stuff to happen, obviously. Too many, and stuff might happen, but not how you want it to. So calorie balance is really important. So for example, cardiovascular training. It's why should I be worried about my calories? Well, you burn so much that you can straight up start to lose weight and therefore muscle and therefore performance, especially when high cardiovascular training's around. You need to be making sure that you're eating enough so that you don't run into detrimental effects. And you're basically just, if you're a cardiovascular trainee, let's say, and you're not eating enough, you're just, not only are you losing weight and impacting your performance, your recovery, it's you're just always waking up feeling like you're just on catch-up mode. Why would we do that? That isn't a good idea, And let's take an example of too much calories. Typical average 16-year-old wants to get strong fast, eats 5,000 calories, gains 1 kilo a week. Yeah, they get strong because they were going to anyway, but they also kind of get a little bit fat. And so there's an example of, stuff's happening, but now you've got this huge trade-off. So it's important that we keep our calorie intake good. And then so next is total protein intake. This just needs to be high enough to facilitate the adaptations that we want, right? If it's not high enough, your body's not going to recover. Like, your body uses proteins, more specifically the amino acids from those proteins, to heal all parts of your body, your brain, your kidneys, and least importantly, in regards to your body, the muscles. So if you're not eating enough protein, your body is going to take that, whatever consumption of protein it's got, put it towards, I don't know, maybe like your brain or your heart, and it's not going to worry so much about your muscles or your joints and tendons, so to speak. And so you need to be eating a sufficient amount so that your body has enough of supply to also focus on growing muscle or recovering the tissues that you're damaging during training. So that's a very important point. And so sufficient fat intake doesn't necessarily relate to too much fat intake, but too little, man, your body just won't function how it should. Like, if your hormone profile and your body function are just not running okay, how do you expect to perform beyond like trying to survive? If you're not getting enough fats to like optimally produce hormones and all these other issues, like your cell walls are made out of fat. If you don't have enough fat, you're not going to be facilitating repair and recovery very well. That's kind of a problem. So you need to be eating enough fat. And we'll talk about what that looks like later. But I also have talked about that before on my basic nutrition video, podcast, same thing, because we are on basically all platforms at this point. If this kind of stuff is just too confusing, please start with the basics and then come back and listen to the rest of this podcast. Unless you want to try and let's play a guessing game of like, do I know what he's talking about? Do I not? That sounds like a terrible game I couldn't imagine. It's like, I feel like that's like me, who's got like general math kind of levels of math, sitting in like a physics classroom and going, oh yeah, like this like makes sense, like physics and shit. Like if I pick up this box and then like it tips over, damn bro, that's like something relating to laws. What was that, Newton's law? Damn bro, feeling pretty smart. You know, you're allowed to go listen to the first one. It's okay. We got to teach you what gravity is first, you know, so to speak. Oh, Ashton, with your side tangents. What's next after fats? Sufficient carb intake. Carbs have performance benefits. Wow. Beyond everything else, right? So I think if you don't have enough fats, you can't perform anyway. And so obviously carbohydrates are less important than fats, but the carbs have a big impact on performance. So see what I mean? Like, it's almost like, you know, you can have your protein intake in check, but if your calories are off, it's not going to matter. You can have your calories in check, just enough protein, and you might get something. And so this is like a checklist of like, look, get this sorted, get this sorted, get this sorted. Just thought I'd clarify that particular approach of this hierarchy, though it might have been self-explanatory. Okay, what's after carb intakes? Nutrient timing. This is like when you eat and how much of that. That's going to make sense in a little bit. Then we got like food composition. So this is like the type of foods you eat, which does make a difference, and we'll talk about that. But those last 2 points are very small differences, by the way. And then we got supplements, which we just won't cover. I've done a whole video on supplements. You can go back and listen to that. I recommend that because I'm not going to be talking about any supplements today, my friends. Okay, this is the fun part. This is the scenario. We have a lifter wanting to get stronger and bigger, right? And fitter. He wants to get fit, big, stronger. Shut up, Ashton. And we know their calorie intake, 2,600 calories. They're currently consuming about 110 grams of protein. They weigh 70 kilos. How are we going to improve this? Well, we're going to systematically, in 4 steps, We're going to calculate macros. We're going to then create a number of meals and then consider meal timing spacing. So how far between each meal should you be eating? Like every 2 hours, every 4 hours. Then we're going to create a macro breakdown for these meals. So, for example, where are we going to eat our protein? Where are we going to eat our carbs? Where are we going to eat our fats? And then we're going to talk about the sources of foods for each meal. So do we want to have higher sugar before the workout, or do we want etc., etc.? These are all things that we're about to break down. Okay, so let's begin with protein. So I've recommended before, up to as my absolute protein potential benefit threshold, as 2.2 grams per kilogram of body weight of protein. Absolute upper limit. I think 2 grams per kilogram of complete proteins is a very good idea. And then with this in mind, and obviously having a wide variety of protein sources, you can aim for 2 grams of complete proteins, but let it climb as high as 2.2 as like your diet kind of displaces some of those incomplete proteins. So for example, pasta has protein. Everyone's like, all the vegans love to say like, pasta's high in protein. And then you actually look at it and it's really low in leucine and is like not 100 like that bioavailable. It's like a shit source of protein. If you're trying to build muscle, you're not going to build muscle on pasta protein. That's for sure. And so, damn, I just dissed the hell out of pasta. But pasta tastes good. So what you might do is you might divide like the incomplete proteins by 2. And then or for example, you have a meal and you need 45 grams of complete proteins, but the pasta makes up 20. Well, you might want to eat more of your complete protein sources. So for example, you have a bit extra beef. Yeah, the meal is now sitting at like 55 grams of protein and you wanted 45. But in regards to complete proteins, you have a closer picture of 45. So that's just an example. So it's 70 kilos and 2 grams per kilogram of complete proteins. We're going to give this imaginary person 140 grams of protein. Right? What about their fats? The lowest I recommend going, unless you have experience and are working with a coach, is 0.7 grams per kilogram of body weight. That's bare minimum. And so at 70 kilos, it's 49 grams or 50 grams rounded up. Always round up your fats. Just do it. Like 45 grams, just make it 50. It's 42, make it 45. Like there's no harm in rounding up. And you might notice that's not much fats. That's quite low, actually. But look, you can eat more if you want. I'm not stopping you. In fact, I probably would recommend it a little bit. And so, as you gain weight, for example, because this person is wanting to gain weight, you obviously need to increase your body weight, since it's body weight relative. So a good idea is perhaps to calculate protein, the body weight, as your goal body weight, not protein, your fat goal, to the goal body weight. So that might actually look like 70 grams of fat. And then you just eat into it until you hit that weight. That's one way to do it. But remember, we're kind of discussing the in brackets optimal here. You might need more fat as an individual. Maybe everything tastes like shit without a little bit more fat. Maybe your profile of like hormone profile and your perceptions indicate you need to eat more fat. That's cool. Go for it. I'm not stopping you. And if you feel those ways, eat more fat. Like everybody's body is different. And so I'm really, really hesitant to release a video like this because everybody's so different. And I know somebody will think it's a good idea to follow this exact approach when I'm just trying to teach concepts here. That's all. Okay. So carbs will be calculated by dividing the remaining calories by 4. So for example, we take 2,500 calories, we go 140 grams of protein, times that by 4, and now we're left with whatever that number is. We subtract that from the calorie intake, and then we subtract the fats. We do 50 times 9. We subtract that. Now what we're left with is this arbitrary calorie number. We divide that by 4, because carbs have 4 calories per gram of carbohydrates, and then so therefore we get left the number of grams of carbs to eat. I noticed I said 2,600 calories, but let's pretend it's 25, because it turns out I've done my math on 2,500 calories. What are the macros left for this person? Well, 2,500 calories, we have 140 grams of protein, 50 grams of fat, and 373 grams of carbs. Congratulations. By the way, if you want my free macro calculator balance sheet, just DM me on Instagram at FitBigStrong. I have this sheet where you basically can just put in the gram per kilogram values, your body weight, your calorie intake, and you can balance it how you want to calculate your macros. If that's something you're interested in, then just DM me, I'll grab your email and I'll send it to you. Step 2, meal timing and frequency. Very cool. Not really. Actually, to be honest, I find this stuff unbelievably exciting and interesting. I don't know about you, but that's just me. Okay. Why should we eat more frequently despite the total protein intake being the same? So when we eat, the proteins get digested. As they get digested, the amino acids from the protein, because protein is just a bunch of amino acids glued together by chemistry, that goes into our bloodstream for our muscles to use. Obviously not just the muscles, but that's the idea. So that means, right, after the food has completely digested, there's no more amino acids, right? The protein's finished. And so the body breaks down not very important sources of amino acids, such as your biceps. I know, it's not going to break down your brain to give amino acids to the biceps. It's going to do the opposite way around. How long does... Well, this sounds really scary because we want as much amino acids in the bloodstream as possible, right? Yeah, we do. And so how long does it actually take for food to digest? Most protein sources, 3 to 3.5 hours. So if you take a chicken breast, that's how long it's going to be in your system roughly. Here's something interesting. Whey protein isolate takes about 1 to 2 hours to digest, completely. So it's a big, super high peak and then a drop. And casein protein can take up to 8 hours to digest. So it's more of a slow, steady thing. And interesting enough, that's because casein protein is hydrophobic. And so what happens is it basically forms a ball in your stomach. And so it has less surface area. And because it's less surface area, less enzymes to break it down, therefore slower release. I thought that was pretty cool. And so if you've had 3 meals, let's say spread over 16 hours, that's 5 hours and 20 minutes each meal. And therefore, now you have time frames of no amino acids, because let's consider the breakdown rate, or the finalizing breakdown rate. It's 3.5 hours, but you're eating every 5 hours. There's a big discrepancy there. And that discrepancy reduces the anabolism to catabolism ratio. Really quickly, what is that? Well, growing muscle is an equation of how much growth or anabolism compared to the amount of breakdown. So if you kept the same level of growth but reduce the amount of breakdown, you increase the size of the muscle, right? And so we want to increase this ratio as much as possible. Well, that's reasonably possible. There'll always be breakdown because of cell turnover and just normal biological processes. But we want those processes to be the ones of necessity. And we want to maintain as much anabolism because that's good, right? There's no point being more catabolic than what we need to be, right? Makes sense. 4 meals is 4 hours, assuming 8 hours of sleep, a 16-hour waking day. It's much more close. This is why meal frequency is important. The more frequently we eat, the more we reduce this window. Keep in mind, the breakdown rates I mentioned was the proteins in isolation. Other macronutrients such as fiber and fat actually slow down digestion. Because you're not just eating just protein, You're eating a variety of foods, hopefully. If you're just eating protein, you'll starve to death. So at 4 meals a day, you'll get almost 100% coverage in your waking hours. That's great. That's what we want. So we are going to do 4 meals a day is our final answer. That's how many meals we're doing. Very cool. Okay, let's do the macro breakdown. Very, very, very exciting. We want most of our carbs around our workout. Here are 4 good reasons, and there's probably more. And actually, no, there definitely is more, but these are such good reasons that I only need to mention 4. These are glycogen replenishment. What is glycogen? It is the muscle's storage of energy. It is basically a glucose sponge. It gives the muscles very immediate energy, so to speak. Well, not very immediate, but very quick access to energy in high energy output scenarios. So we want to replenish that so we can perform. Keeping our blood glucose high, because we just ate carbs, around our workouts is good because that helps facilitate the central nervous system to actually utilize its energy. Because let me explain that. The central nervous system, it uses blood glucose to fire. It takes the energy from the blood, or the glucose from the blood, and then uses that to fire your muscles. We don't want to dampen the effects of that by having low blood glucose. So eating around the workouts, specifically carbohydrates, will have that positive effect. Also, insulin is more sensitive to muscle post-workout. So training allows us to modify slightly the partitioning ratio of insulin. Why is that good? Well, insulin just pushes all those damn nutrients, amino acids, blood lipids, carbohydrates, everything into the cell. And that's really good because insulin also changes how proteins are expressed. You can aid in increasing that anabolism to catabolism ratio by specifically eating carbs pre and post workout. Very, very, very cool stuff. Also, insulin is a vasodilator, so it opens up your blood vessels and you get cool pumps. So pre-workout, this can help with moving nutrients around your body. Bigger pumps are also hypertrophically stimulative due to a thing called the cell swelling effect. Cell swelling, in other words, getting a big juicy pump, actually does independently grow muscle, just not as important. However, it's not as important as like tension, like actually active tension, and like a slow eccentric. Those are a little bit more important, and obviously sufficient volume, but if we can enhance the effect of a small influence, why wouldn't we, right? Like we're here to maximize the fine details, so I'm going to mention them. So, a good rule of thumb is about 2/3 of your carbs around your workout window. That's like pre and post workout meals. And look, you can go more if you really like. It's totally up to you. But that's just generally a good rule. Because sometimes when your carbs get really high, trying to eat that many carbs around your workout is just difficult. And you get digestive issues and you feel like, you just feel crap. So, how do we split that between pre and post? 50-50 is a good idea. Okay. Remember to adjust this depending on you. But, given 373 grams of carbs, 2/3 of that is roughly 250. So we're going to eat 125 pre and post workout. Now we have left 123 grams of carbs. Should you eat more earlier or later? Well, too many carbs pre-bed can interfere with sleep because maybe your body temperature rises because you're just digesting all those carbs and you're like, and you get those feelings of energy. So you just feel restless and sweaty and gross, and maybe that's a bad idea because obviously we want to sleep. So maybe you do like 60-40. You have more carbs in the morning than later, or you can even just do 50-50. This one is up to you. It requires you to experiment, and your lifestyle, right, determines the spread. If you sleep really hot, maybe you don't want to enhance that. But keep in mind, total carbohydrate is more important than timing. So as long as you get the carbs in, doesn't matter. So this is the split. We're doing 62 in the morning, 125 each post-workout, and then we'll just do 61 at night. How's about fats? Well, fats slow down digestion. So spread them as far away as we can from our workout. Especially like post-workout. We want that glycogen resynthesis to be as quick as possible, right? So here's our split. 15 grams in the morning, 10 grams pre-workout, 5 grams post-workout, and then 20 grams before bed. You might want to bias your fats just like a little bit at night to kind of slow down digestion. Remember that protein. And then lengthen the release of those amino acids and those nutrients. What are we going to do for protein? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to spread them evenly each meal. That's what we're going to do. There is no particular benefit of having large amounts of protein in one particular meal, because you'll have less protein in other meals. Like, let me think of an analogy here. You have a river, right? Okay, here we go. You're a farmer. You got to water your garden, right? Or you got to water your crops, whatever the hell you grow. You're a cotton farmer, and you got to water your giant fields, and you're going to do it the most efficient way. And you have a river, right, which provides a steady stream of water. And that therefore irrigates the cotton farms nice and well at the rate in which you want that to happen. Great. The farm is getting a consistent supply of water and therefore is going to grow maximally. Just like your body, if you give it a smooth stream of amino acids. Now, for some reason, maybe the cotton farmer wasn't a nice bloke. He had some troubles with the law or made some poor ethical decisions. God has then taken a big urinate into the river, and now the river is going, and there's a huge galley of water. Guess what happens? All the plants get watered, but they get like double dosed. And then all of a sudden the lake goes dry. Now the plants aren't getting watered. Is that really the best approach? One, a lot of that water is getting wasted, and there's also not enough water for later, and so the growth becomes inconsistent. That's why we eat our protein evenly, because we just want to keep things consistent. There's no benefit to a giant spike because the plants or your biceps don't benefit to the extent that you want them to. And so it's the absence of amino acids which is the problem, right? And yes, total protein intake is still more important than timing, but that is the rationale for spreading protein evenly. How are we going to manage our incomplete proteins, you may ask? Well, thank you for asking, my friend. Well, see, what we're going to do here is we're going to take our protein that's incomplete. We're going to divide it by a number. It's not 1, it's not 3, it's number 2. He said number 2. And what we're going to do here, mate, is we're going to take the calories. We're going to go 1/2 carbohydrates, 1/2 proteins. Amazing stuff. And the reason for this is because they're calorie equivalent, right? And so if you are to have incomplete proteins, it's probably a good idea to spread them evenly between carbohydrates and proteins. So your calorie intake's met, yet you still have like a rough idea of how to manage your proteins. Woo! We got through all of that. And now, what is the meal distribution? What's that going to look like? So meal 1, 35 grams of protein, 62 grams of carbs, 15 fat. Protein is going to stay the same. The pre and post-workout meals are going to have 125 grams of carbs each, where the post-workout's only going to have 5 grams of fat. The pre-workout's going to have 10, because we want to have less fats post-workout. Dinner, we have, again, 61 grams of carbs and 20 grams of fat. There we go. That's really cool. Okay, step 4. This is the last step in maximizing the performance of your diet. Sources of food. I'm literally not going to create meals. I'm just going to give you cool facts, which you should use to consider when designing your food choices. So, post-workout, there's more of a benefit of using high glycemic foods to facilitate quicker glycogen synthesis. You get a bigger spike of insulin, and so there's more insulin, there's more of these peptides pushing the nutrients into your cells. So you quicker facilitate glycogen resynthesis. Therefore, you get the benefits of full glycogen. Quicker aids in performance, and full glycogen can help increase muscle protein synthesis through a thing called glycogen-mediated muscle protein synthesis. I think that's pretty cool. So maybe that's a consideration. Fiber should be avoided around your workouts to prevent slowing of digestion. That one's self-explanatory. Pre-workout should combine multiple carb sources. So let's say fruit and rice, or something like that. And this is to maximize glucose transporter saturation. And therefore, you get higher rates of glucose elevation. Okay, let's explain what I just said. So when you digest food, the molecules of sugar, or polysaccharides and monosaccharides, end up in your gut. And there are receptors which pick up on that, and then they pick up the sugar and they go, hey fam, could really do for some of this lemonade. They grab onto it, and then they send it into the bloodstream. That only happens so quickly because there's only so many receptors. But here's the catch. There's lots of different types of receptors. There's some for, let's say, glucose and fructose and maltodextrin, and there's more than one. And so if you combine multiple carb sources, you get multiple of these transporters getting saturated to the maximum capacity. So what happens is your blood glucose levels, the total level of glucose entering your bloodstream goes up, which is great, because that means as you deplete glucose when you work out, the rate of that being replaced to keep your central nervous system firing is maintained at a high level. So that's why we want multiple sources. Consider high casein protein sources pre-bed to spread those amino acids longer. And then that might actually help promote a higher anabolic to catabolic ratio. Because, 8 hours of not eating, we might as well give it some amino acids. So there's things like cottage cheese, or literally you can make like a casein pudding. It's kind of gross, but you gotta do what you gotta do sometimes. Here we go. This one, it might be controversial, but we're not here to talk about health. Your body has an easier time using saturated fats for hormone production. So you may not limit, if that makes sense, your body's production if you incorporate saturated fats. So imagine your body has like a maximum productive capacity to produce testosterone. Like if you maximized all your nutritional variables, there is a number of testosterone molecules your body will produce. saturated fat is one of those nutritional strategies to just ensure that if you have a little bit, you are not limiting your body, because it is such it's an easier conversion pathway to all the backbones. And so, keep that in mind. It's like if you're having like just enough zinc and then you have all the zinc you need, there's going to be a difference in your testosterone. Or you sleep 7.5 hours and then you go to 8 hours, you're going to have a difference. These are all small differences, but this is a podcast based on small differences. Notice we didn't cover micronutrients. I couldn't really give a shit. I'm basically, though it's like very important, this is about macro breakdowns and discussing some cool theory, which I wanted to share. And that's all we have. That was a pretty advanced episode. But hey, that's what some of you guys want to hear, right? Let's break down all the little details. And if you're still confused, you then message me on Instagram, and then we organize the solution for you. That's what we do at FitBigStrong. Make sure you follow us on all of our platforms. That's what you're going to do. Because you loved this content so much, you're going to scour the internet for everything FitBigStrong. And you're going to like, follow, and share it to all your friends. Your ex-girlfriend, which you haven't spoken to in months, share on my podcast. I might get laid, and I might get another follower. Who knows? I don't. Anyways, it was nice to have this lovely chat with you at 11:48 p.m. at night. I'm going to cry myself to sleep. As usual, I have no friends. Catch you later.